Most frequently, when you make shapes, you'll use the shape tools. So I'm going to show you how to use the shape tools in this lesson. To follow along, open up After Effects, start a new comp. I'm going to take my HD comp here, and then we'll get rolling. The shape tools are up here. If you click the little disclosure triangle, you see there are 5 of them. But don't be fooled, folks. There really are only 3 different shape tools. There's a rectangle tool, which is also the rounded rectangle tool, an ellipse tool, and a polystar tool, which makes polygons and stars. So we'll start with the ellipse tool, which is the simplest of the 3, clicking on that. Over here, we've got fill and stroke and the size of the stroke. Now, you might think you need to fix these guys now, make sure they're proper and everything, but you don't. You can change these later. So don't sweat these guys now. It'll just pick up whatever you did last, and that's fine for the time being. What you do now when you make a shape is simply click and drag, and there's your shape. I'm going to undo that for the moment because I'm going to show you a couple of little keyboard shortcuts. Control-Z to undo that, or Command-Z on a Mac. If I start dragging from the lower right-hand corner, for example, you'll see that the center of the ellipse is not where I started. Where I started is the lower right-hand corner of the bounding box, just so you know. I'll undo that. If I start anywhere else, I'm just trying to show you a relative position here. If I start there, you'll see again that the center is not where I started it, just the bounding box over left-hand corner now. And now I'm going to do a couple of keyboard shortcuts or keyboard modifiers, and to do that, I need to continue to hold down the mouse button. If I want to center it on the place where I started dragging, then I hold down the Control or the Command key. Now it's going to be centered up right there, which is probably not what I want to do, but anyways, that's how that works. If I want to move it, I'll let go of the Control or the Command key now. If I want to move it someplace else, I'll press the space bar, move it around like that. If I'm really interested in centering it up on the anchor point, for example, I can move the upper left-hand corner to the anchor point because the upper left-hand corner is where we started this thing. There. And then I can hold down the Control or the Command key, and now it's centered up on the anchor point. But again, I can move these guys later. These little keyboard shortcuts are just kind of for fun. You can always make adjustments later. One other thing you can do with the keyboard shortcut is to make this from this oval shape into a circle. So just press the Shift key, and that constrains the proportions like so. And if I let go of my mouse, now we'll make a circle. But I'm going to let go of my Shift key now and go back to having an ellipse. And I'm going to position it sort of off-center here on purpose and make it a little bit larger. And now I'm done. So now we've made a shape. When we do this, we make a shape layer. And the shape layer has a contents property group. And inside the contents property group is the ellipse. And the ellipse has a bunch of property groups inside it. It has the path, and then a property group for its stroke, a property group for its fill, and a property group for its own transform properties, which is kind of interesting. The ellipse has transform properties, and the shape layer has transform properties, and they're easy to confuse. This one here just affects the ellipse, and this one affects every single shape you put inside this layer if you put more than one shape in or just have that one. So I'm going to focus on these property groups here. First of all, let's take a look at the ellipse path. Ellipse path has only 2 properties, size and position. Notice the position is 0, 0. Even though it's way over here, it's relative to where you put it. So if you change the position, it'll be changing its position from the place where you placed it. The size, again, is set because the x value is wide and the y value is a little bit shorter, smaller, so it's this wide thing. If I unlink it, I can change things individually like that. If I link it, you'll see that they work in concert like that. All right, so 2 things. I got this position. If I change the position, I'm changing it relative to where I put it in. I'm going to put that back to 0. But down here, I have a transform property, and it has a position too. How confusing is that? But this is relative to the layer. So if I set this to 0, for example, 0, 0, now it's going to pop right to the center there, center over the layer's anchor point, which shows you that you don't need to go to all the trouble to try to center it up. You can do it down here later. Change the scale here. Notice it starts at 100, 100, and it's relative to the starting point, not relative to its actual size. And you can skew things down here and make other changes like that. So that's the basic transform properties for this shape and for any shape. They'll always have the same kind of transform properties. Let's move on down to the stroke and the fill. Now it's called the gradient fill now because if you look up here, the type of fill that was selected is a gradient. You can see by the little color swatch up there that it's a gradient. I set the type of fill by clicking the word fill and the type of stroke by clicking the word stroke. If I open up fill here, you'll see there's no option here for fill type if it's a gradient. It just has a color. Let me scroll down a little bit here. You'll see it's a color, and you can edit the gradient. But if I want to change to solid, it doesn't give me an option to do that. So let's say I want to change the solid. I go up here to do that. Click on fill. Then I can change to solid if I want. And now you notice when you go down here, you won't see the gradient thing anymore. You just see a swatch for the color. I'm going to switch back to a gradient here by clicking on that. I'm going to go back to a radial gradient like that. There we go. So let's see how that works, because it's kind of cool the way gradients work here. Gradients have start and end points. Really neat. I'm going to click on this guy, and I want to see the start and end point here, but I don't see it because I've got the wrong tool selected. I've got the shape tool selected. So I'm going to go to the selection tool by pressing the V key. There you go. Now you can see all the bounding boxes and things. It's skewed because we skewed it down below. And these are the handles for the gradient. That's the start point. This is the end point. I'll drag the end point, and I'll watch down here as the numbers change as I move it around. You can animate this guy, which is cool. You can keyframe it. You can also keyframe the start point, move it around, so you can move the gradient around like that, which is pretty neat. All right, so that's how that works. If I want to change the colors, I go to Edit Gradient down here, or I can click on this swatch up here. So we'll click on Edit Gradient here. Here are the colors. I got obviously red and blue. You can click on the color stop and change it to something else. I'll change it to green just to make sure we can see it. And over here, I'll go to, let's say, purple. I can see we made a difference there. All right. That's the gradient. If I change to something else besides the gradient by going up here, I can go to a solid color or a linear gradient. I'll cancel out of that one. Let's go to the stroke. The stroke is the outline there. Click on the disclosure triangle for stroke. You see there's a color because it's just a solid. If you look over here, you see it's a solid there. I can change the color by clicking this color swatch or this color swatch. Let's change the color of the stroke to something different than what it is now. We'll change it to orange, for example. All right, let's make it larger so you can see it a little bit better. There you go. And I can change that to a gradient by clicking on the word stroke. We'll click on the linear gradient for that one there. There you go, click OK. And now the stroke and the fill both have these little start and end handles, which can be confusing. Because here we got start and end points for this one and start and end points for the fill. Which one's which, right? Let's just see. Okay, that looks like that's the fill. This one looks like it's going to be the stroke, which is kind of cool that you can make it race around like that. Also change its relative position like so. Okay. So you have two sets of start and end points. So that's how you work with the basic features of shape tools. What I want to do now is show you the other two shape tools because they have some other features that are not related to color and transform properties. So I'll close down the ellipse here and I'll turn off the eyeball for ellipse. I'm going to add a shape to this layer, but before I do that, I want to add a new shape layer. If you have a shape layer selected and add another shape, it's going to add that shape to the layer. But the layer is not selected like this, and you add another shape, it'll create a new shape layer. So I'm going to go to the rectangle tool and drag that, and that adds another shape layer. See that? So I'm going to delete that by just going Control Command Z to undo that. So let's add a shape to this shape layer, which you can do. Clicking on that, have the rectangle selected, and just drag the rectangle. It takes on the same features you had before in terms of the color and the gradient, that kind of stuff. Let's open it up a little bit here. Close down these other gradients because they're really not that big of a deal because you already know about them. But the rectangle path is an option that the ellipse doesn't have. It has the roundness option. That's why you can use the rectangle tool to be a rounded rectangle tool as well. You see that? There we go. And even though these guys are inside the same shape layer, they can have different colors. They don't all have to have the same color. So for example, I'll just open up the ellipse again so you can see it or turn it on. The ellipse is tucked away there. Let me just select that so you can move the ellipse a little bit here. There we go. Out of the way. This guy in place. They both have the same colors now, but let's go up to the rectangle and change things, just so you know you can do that. So we'll get onto the fill here. Click on Edit Gradient. And we'll make it really obviously different. We'll click at the green one here. Make it blue. Click on the purple one here. Make it yellow, just so you know that you can change things. They don't have to have the same color from one shape to the next inside the same shape layer. So that's the rectangle, just that subtle difference in terms of the rectangle path having a roundness feature. But now we're going to go to the Polystar tool, which is really amazing. So we'll click on the Polystar tool by selecting either the polygon or the star. I'll select the polygon first. Click on that. Drag a shape. And that's not what you expected to see, right? Is that a polygon? Holy mackerel, how can that be? I'm going to click over here on the star tool and drag that. There you go. Now that's what you'd expect to see, right? But in fact, they're the same tool, just with different features. Let's take a look at the first one we made, the polygon. I'll turn off the star. Notice that they're both called Polystar, but we're going to work with the polygon version of the Polystar first. Open this guy up, close down this other stuff. Open up the Polystar path and notice a couple things here. It has a type. The other ones didn't have a type. This type is polygon. It has a number of points, and it has a rotation, outer radius, Outer roundness? Well, the outer roundness is what's causing all this kind of strange behavior. Right now it's minus 520. If I bring that towards 0, it's going to turn into a polygon. When I get to 0, it is in fact a polygon. Change the number of points, like that. You can do it after the fact. You don't need to worry about setting up in advance. So the roundness is what causes it to behave like that, which I think is just so cool. So you can do that kind of stuff. The outer radius is not that big a deal. It just makes it larger. Now what I could do is I could just shift this to a star, and it would behave differently because it would add an inner radius and an inner roundness. That's the difference between a star and a polygon, both made with the Polystar tool. Let's go to the other one anyways. I'll turn this one on, that one off. Go to this one here that was started its life as a star. And if you look at this guy, when I open it up, Polystar Path, you'll see that its type is a star. I could switch to polygon, and it would have different properties here, but we'll go back to star. See the inner radius, outer radius? Nothing's changed because we made the little shift back and forth. Add some points, like so. And what's really cool is the inner radius. Pull that guy out. That. Look at the outer radius. Expands the length of the stars. Now it's a little more interesting now instead of what you saw with the polygon. Inner roundness, this is great. Look at that. And the outer roundness, also fun to play with. There we go. So, I think you can see by now that the 3 shape tools give you all sorts of possibilities.